Hello everyone, it's a little after 1 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern, and that means it's time to begin another of our monthly Weather Talk webinars. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Henry Regis. Running the technical side of our program is our own Noah Newman. We're coming to you live from the Colorado Climate Center here at Colorado State University in sunny Fort Collins, Colorado. For those of you who are unable to join us for our live broadcasts, we'll be recording it for future viewing on our website. All of our Weather Talk webinars are sponsored by grants from the National Science Foundation. During today's webinar, we're going to talk about lake effect snow. Have any of you ever experienced lake effect snow? And if you have, you'll realize that it can be snowing like crazy where you are, and just a few miles away the sun can be shining. So it truly is quite the phenomenon. And to talk about this winter weather phenomenon, we have with us the Weather Channel's winter weather expert and longtime snow lover, Tom Niziol. Tom has been a winter weather expert for the Weather Channel since 2012. He's a graduate of the State University of New York at Oswego and is a native of Buffalo, New York. Speaking of Buffalo, he is the former Science and Operations Officer and later on meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service office there, where he spent 32 years of his life. Tom loves winter weather and is also a Buffalo Sabres hockey fan. Well, welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, Henry, this is a great pleasure being here and being able to share everything that I know about lake effect snow.
Hey, Tom, I got a quick question for you as we start. How did you become interested? I realize growing up in Buffalo, you probably saw a lot of lake effect snow, but what got you interested in winter weather and all this type of stuff?
It's simple. Living in Buffalo and living at the heart of lake effect snow country, I was just amazed as a kid to be going out one day in beautiful sunny skies and a few hours later getting hit by a snowstorm that was just a riot for a kid because you got to dress up and go out in the middle of these, what I considered localized blizzards. So it was so much fun enjoying it, I wanted to learn more about it. And, what better place to learn about it than right on the Great Lakes where I attended school in a place called Oswego, New York.
Oh, that they certainly get hit with their share of lake effect snow there too. Well, let me go ahead and pass the controls on to you and take it away for today's webinar.
Great. Hey, good morning, everybody, and I am really excited here to participate in this webinar, and I hope I can share, like I say, some of what I've learned and some of the fun that I've had with lake effect snow. So hopefully everybody can see my screen here.
Not yet, Tom. Actually, if you still need to check a box somewhere to show your screen.
Alrighty, so we're going to go on here and just take a look at
there we go. Perfect.
All right, very good. So let's start off here with a quick outline of what we're going to do today. I want to kind of define what lake effect snow is. And by the way, these types of snows occur off the oceans as well around the world. So we'll call it LOWS, lake and ocean effect snow. We're going to look at favored locations both in North America and around the world. And then we'll talk about the whole concept of how these snow bands develop. And by the way, throughout the presentation, I'll be showing fun little photographs like this one from the National Weather Service office in Buffalo a few years ago where I worked. That's after a lake effect snow event. A lot of fun, isn't it? Here's another image from a snow event that we'll talk about that occurred in Buffalo a number of years ago. But I want to talk about snowband classification, what the different types of snowbands are and how they develop, and then a fun look at what heavy snow looks like. So for everyone there, this is not going to be a highly technical discussion with lots of mathematical equations and the like. It really is just going to talk about pretty much how we observe and enjoy lake effect snow. So what is lake effect snow? What does it look like? For those of you, and I saw from, I think we're 40 states and 4 different provinces on this webinar today. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, I wanted to give you an idea of what it's like to leave one part of town where the skies are sunny and a few blocks later head into something really severe. So this is great video that was taken in a lake effect snow event that occurred off of the Great Lakes around Buffalo. A lot of this will be Buffalo centric to begin with. So here we go. We'll play a few seconds of it, and I hope this works out for everyone. So there we are driving in beautiful sunny skies, but what in the heck is that down to the south of us, south of Buffalo coming off the lake? Well, let's speed this up a little bit. And after about a mile and a half, what in the world happens? We're in the middle of what looks like a blizzard. This is a snow band that actually produced snowfall rates of 4 to 5 inches an hour with thunder and lightning. And you can see this gentleman driving here just a mile or so into this snow band. His windshield wipers are caking up. Okay, there we go. Are we back now, guys?
Thanks, Tom. We are back. We've got you again. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And I apologize for whatever might have happened there. But let's get back to where we were here. It occurs when cold air moves over a relatively warm body of water. Now, in most cases, the snow develops after a cold front has gone through the area. And typically, when you see a cold front go through an area, afterwards, skies typically clear up. But in this case, they don't. So let's take a quick look here, and I want to give you a little quiz here, fair weather or not. So here we are in the Great Lakes region, and we're looking at a couple of points here, one around Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the other near Grand Rapids, Michigan. The winds are coming down across the lakes here out of a northwesterly direction. And it's interesting here, the temperature right here around Green Bay is 2 below zero at this time. But on the other side of the lake, here in Grand Rapids, it's 18 degrees, some 20 degrees warmer. So this is a nice big high pressure system that's built over the area, and you would expect to see nice sunny skies here. Well, again, there's the temperatures. The lake, a very warm 37 degrees compared to the air temperature of 2 below. And the air really gets modified as it comes across the lake here. It picks up heat and moisture in a very simple sense. So if we take a look at a satellite image, this part of the world in Wisconsin around Green Bay, in this satellite image, these are clear skies here. All you're seeing is snow cover on the ground. But over the lake, we see all these narrow streamers of snow developing. And on the other side of the lake, it is cloudy and snowing like a banshee here in places like Grand Rapids and the lower portion of Michigan. One of the guys in charge of the Weather Service in Buffalo decades and decades ago said it best when he claimed that the weather often clears up stormy to the lee of the lakes during the wintertime. So, does lake effect snow only occur in the Great Lakes? This was our first question here, and it was an interesting combination of people. About 12% said, yeah, lake effect snow just occurs in the Great Lakes. About 88% of you said that was false, and you are correct. Let's go ahead and take a look at where it might occur in the world. So in North America, all these bodies of water produce lake, bay, or ocean effect type of snows, and that includes places like the Great Salt Lake here in Utah, the Great Lakes, Chesapeake Bay, Delaware Bay, even the Bay of Fundy, the Gulf of St. Lawrence here. For our Canadian viewers, Lake Nipigon and Lake Winnipeg as well produce some sort of lake effect snow. Think about it. All you have to do is move cold air across a warm body of water, so it should occur in other parts of the world as well, and in fact it does. I've seen these snows off the North Sea, the Bay of Bothnia up here in places like Sweden, off the Black Sea and the Caspian Seas, and there's a lot of documentation about snows that occur off the Yellow Sea and in particular off the Sea of Japan. The Japanese meteorologists and researchers have done a lot of work on the snows that occur in that part of the world. Again, we'll zoom this in a little bit more closely so you can see all of these areas. Well, pretty much all you have to do is be in a latitude somewhere in the northern hemisphere here where you can move that cold air from a place like Siberia across warm, relatively warm bodies of water, and you will develop lake or ocean effect snows. So, next question I had here that came across was, is there such a thing as lake effect rain showers? Okay, we get lake effect snow, but can we get lake effect rain? That is rain that develops off the Great Lakes or other bodies of water. 93% of you said yes, you can, and there were about 7% that said you could not. So for those 7%, I want to explain a little bit about how a typical lake effect season develops. And this again is on the Great Lakes. It's a little complicated, but I'll go through it. I'll go through it here, and we're going to begin in the summertime. If you watch my mouse here, this is in late July or early August. So at that time of the year, the x-axis is each month of the year. This is late July right here. And on the y-axis is temperature. The red line is the temperature of the air temperature outside, and the blue line is the temperature of the water of the lake, and this is Lake Erie on the Great Lakes. And as you can see, at about this time of the year in late July, on average, the two temperatures are about the same. But as you go into the fall, the air temperatures become cooler much more quickly than this large volume of water, the lake, that loses heat much more slowly than the air. And at some point, as the air temperatures are much cooler than the warm lake, you develop instability over the lake, but it's not yet cold enough to produce snow, so you get lake effect rain showers. Then as you get later into the fall and into the winter, the air temperatures become cold enough where we see lake effect snow. So indeed, we do get lake effect rain showers as well as we are in the early portions of the winter season. So when does lake effect snows end? When do these things end? Is there a way that they, obviously they're going to end when the air temperature gets warm enough in the spring and the summer. We don't have to worry about it. But in many of the lakes in the northern hemisphere, they freeze over with ice cover at some point in the year. So most of these lakes, right in here as we go through this area, Nipigon, Winnipeg, the northern lakes in Canada all freeze up, Hudson Bay, at some point in the wintertime, and that typically will cut off the lake effect snow activity. So let's go down to the Great Lakes then and look at the Great Lakes and the ice cover that we see on the Great Lakes, because throughout the winter, as the air continues to cool and cool, we develop ice cover. So our next question we had here was, which Great Lakes develops the most ice cover? Well, 36% of the respondents said Superior. Interesting, nobody actually mentioned Michigan. Huron, 7%. 39% said Lake Erie, and 18% Lake Ontario. And indeed, as we go through the wintertime, Lake Erie typically freezes over before any other lake. So Lake Erie is the correct answer here. And let me show you how this works. This is a satellite image. Now, unfortunately, I don't have Lake Superior in this image up here, but I'm just showing some of the lakes here. And you can see all the darker areas here. This is open water on Lake Michigan. Most of Lake Huron open. Some of the white here down in the bays is ice. Lake Ontario is wide open. But look at Lake Erie. This is Lake Erie, and at this point of the year, and I'm guessing this is probably sometime in late January, early February, Lake Erie is completely frozen over. Well, why the heck does Lake Erie freeze over? It's the southernmost of all of the Great Lakes here. Well, the reason is pretty simple. If we take a look at all of the Great Lakes going from Lake Superior to Lake Michigan, to Lake Huron, which is in here as well, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario, Lake Erie is a very shallow body of water. In fact, I'm going to go down to this table here and show you that Lake Erie's average depth is only about 62 feet. Compare that to Superior at nearly 500 feet deep, and even Lake Erie's close cousin, Lake Ontario, which is 4 to 5 times deeper than Lake Erie on average. What that does then is it means that the volume of water in Lake Erie compared to all of these other lakes is much, much less. And so Lake Erie freezes over much more quickly than any of the other Great Lakes. And for the most part, once the lake has ice cover completely across it, most lake effect activity stops, but not all of it. We can get open leads in the lake that can cause some lake effect snow bands as well. So let's take a look here at a typical winter, the seasonal ice cover and how it grows on the Great Lakes. So here's the first week in January, and this is the ice concentration. This is the key right here. So first week in January, some of the bays here are beginning to develop ice cover. The extremely shallow end of the western part of Lake Erie here is developing ice cover, Lake St. Clair as well. As we get into the middle of January, you notice that Lake Erie is now developing a tremendous amount of ice cover here. And by the beginning of February, Lake Erie typically is completely covered with ice. Very deep Lake Ontario does not. Lake Huron, for the most part, does not. Very deep Lake Michigan does not. Superior, even though it's the deepest and highest volume of all the lakes, is also the farthest north in latitude. So the cold air plays an important role in developing ice cover on Superior. By about the beginning of March, Lake Erie still completely frozen over. It begins to start to melt on its edges. Look at Superior. Superior typically develops its greatest ice cover right around the beginning of March, typically does not get completely frozen over. And then by the middle of March into the beginning of April, we lose all of our ice cover as everything warms up for the year. Here's a look at the annual snowfall in a place like the Great Lakes region. And around the Great Lakes, we see some tremendous annual snowfall amounts. On the UP of Michigan, we typically get anywhere from 180 to 200 inches of snow a year. And my favorite spot for snow in the world, this is in the central part of New York State between Syracuse and Watertown, New York, referred to as the Tug Hill Plateau. They typically pick up an average of about 200 inches a year. You know, it's interesting here, I'll digress for a second and mention the fact that a lot of these areas are coincidentally located in areas where we have a little bit of elevation, some hills, or well, we'll call them mountains in the east, but hills. Elevations downwind of the lakes, the prevailing wind, by the way, blowing from west to east, downwind of the lakes where we have a higher elevation, and that typically enhances snowfall. So you get a second boost in snowfall to the east or the lee of these Great Lakes where we have elevation. 200 inches of snow, that's a lot of snow, guys. And it leads me up to the next question that we had here. What's the highest annual snowfall ever recorded in one winter season in the Great Lakes region? Okay, so our answers here were 960 inches, 466, 120, or 74. And I'd like to say that we get this type of snow here, but you only get this pretty much in the Rockies, the Cascades, the Sierra, in the real high country, typically above about 8,000 feet. But in the Great Lakes region, in a place called Hooker, New York, which is located on the Tug Hill Plateau in the winter of 76-77, many of our more senior listeners today are going to know that year. The winter of 76-77, they picked up 466 inches of snow. This makes this part of the country the snowiest populated region to the east of the Rocky Mountains. Everybody hanging in here with me? We're going to get on to our next part here and try to give you an idea on how the scale that these snows occur on. And typically, there's a little bit of technical jargon here. They occur on what we refer to as a meso-alpha scale. They're small scale, but not tiny scale. So typically, on a scale of about 12 to 120 miles in a horizontal sense. In the vertical, going up into the atmosphere, they're usually confined to about the first 10,000 feet of the atmosphere. And on a time scale, well, they're generally on the order of several hours, though multi-day events are not unusual. Those are the ones I really enjoy. So again, take a look here. We're looking at Lake Superior here. So we're on a scale of tens of miles to a few hundred miles. And this is an image right here of lake effect snow bands that we're going to talk about in a minute here, coming off of Lake Superior. And look at this tiny body of water here, Lake Nippon. I love this little body of water. It actually produces narrow bands of lake effect snow as well before it freezes over. So yeah, on a horizontal scale, they're somewhat almost on the order of a summertime thunderstorm. Really one of my favorite images that I've ever seen in lake effect snow. This is taken by a guy who was in the traffic copter in the city of Buffalo a few years ago when one of these massive bands came off of Lake Erie, and you're actually seeing the northern wall of this lake effect snow band. It looks like a summertime thunderstorm, doesn't it? And in some respects, it's on a scale of that thunderstorm. What I try to impart upon people who have never been in one of these bands is think about being on the north side of the city here, and you're going to go visit your friend on the south side of the city that afternoon. You're in sunny skies here. You're going to get your gear together, and you're going to drive down here. You hit this wall, and within a matter of a few hundred yards, you're into visibilities down below a quarter of a mile and snow coming down at a rate of 2 to 3 inches an hour. This is what's so amazing about it. Is there any wonder that anybody that lives here and has an interest in nature wouldn't want to study something like this? So we'll get to a few more of those images as we go along here. Okay, so I talked about on a scale of a summertime thunderstorm. For those of you who are a little more geeky into weather here and look at things like profiles of the temperature in the atmosphere. These are a couple of soundings of the atmosphere. The sounding on the right is from a summertime thunderstorm in Texas. The red line here going up in height is the temperature. And on the left side is a sounding from a typical wintertime lake effect snow event. And I'm going to use my very crude artistic skills here to draw in the summertime thunderstorm here that goes up to a height of about 45,000 feet in the atmosphere. These are the big guys that produce the severe weather out in the plains, 45,000 feet tall, and that's not uncommon for summertime thunderstorms. Take a look at our little convective cousin over here in the winter. This is a typical major lake effect snowstorm. Yeah, it doesn't look major to anybody here. It really grows only to about 8 to 10,000 feet into the atmosphere. But I'll tell you what, this little guy can produce some pretty prodigious snowfalls. This is a sounding from a snowstorm that occurred back in January of 2005 off the Great Lakes, and it produced 70 inches of snow in a 3-day period. And so even though it's on a relatively small scale, great things can come in small packages here. So, temporal scale, I mentioned they last from anywhere from a few hours to several days. And let me point out, we'll talk about this later again, but I use this analogy a lot of times. A lake effect snowstorm, you kind of stick one end of a hose into the body of water and you put the nozzle out and you direct it at some location. And as you move the nozzle, that is a proxy for a change in wind direction. The wind direction actually tells us where these snow bands are going to occur. So if you can keep the winds out of one direction for a long period of time and have that nozzle directed downwind of the lakes, you can get a lot of snow. And I mean a lot of snow. Again, this is the Tug Hill Plateau from an event that occurred back in 2002. This was a week-long storm. This snow band just set up across these lakes and kept pummeling the area over a 5-day period. They picked up 126 inches of snow here. And in Buffalo, New York, this is a highly populated area. We got 82 inches of snow in that week. That was Christmas week. The only saving grace here, most of the kids were home from school and a lot of businesses were closed, but that was an amazing event. Now, people will often say, well, we had 3 different storms that hit us when these lake effect snowstorms come through, and it's not really different storms that hit, it's just a change in wind direction. And so I'm going to give you an idea from this rather old satellite picture. This is an image of snow on the ground in upstate New York here, and you see these 3 different areas, one down here, there's another swath of snow here, and a third narrow swath of snow here. And again, it all is related to the direction of the prevailing wind. So in this event, we had a west-southwest wind that came down the length of Lake Erie and started a very heavy snow band that produced about 16 inches of snow here in 12 hours south of the city of Buffalo that's located right there. A little shortwave in the atmosphere backed the winds to southwest for about a 12-hour period of time, and as the wind shifted, it pushed the snow band up across the Buffalo area. And then after the shortwave went through, the winds came around to the northwest, and we had multiple narrow bands of snow developed to the south of Buffalo. That's kind of how it can work temporally, and often does work when we have these cold storms come across the Great Lakes. So, conceptual model of how lake effect snow forms. Essentially, we're moving cold air from a landmass across a warm body of water. And as that air moves across that warm body of water, heat and moisture is released into that air mass. And as that moisture in the form of water vapor now rises into that air mass, it condenses out into the form of snowflakes. And as that air comes across to this end of the lake, it kind of slows down and piles up here. It converges as it comes off that smooth lake to the rough land, and it gets pushed up into the atmosphere. And this is pretty much, in a very simple sense, how lake effect snows develop. So this concept of moving cold air across a warm body of water, it can occur on all scales. And leave it to the weatherman who goes to Disney World. Let's see if this works. Yeah, Disney World, on a day when it's not warm, but it's cold, and we actually there are seeing streamers or steam coming off the warm pool. Air temperatures there were about 50 degrees and the water was about 78 degrees, but I'm from up north. I went swimming that day anyhow. So that's on a very small scale. You get that? Now let's go to one of my favorite places in the world. And again, if you're a weather geek, you take the advantage to go anywhere and study the weather. So this is on one beautiful morning in my favorite canoeing spot in the world in the Adirondack Park region of St. Regis Pond. It was a very cold morning and the water is relatively warm. And let's see if this works here. Look at the steam devils, the steam coming off of the lake. And that essentially is the same concept that we see on the Great Lakes when we move very cold air across a warm body of water. So let's go on to a real-world example here, and I'm going to blow past this for, well, no, we're going to put this in here as well. The depth of the cold air that comes down from the north across lower latitudes in the winter is generally pretty shallow. It's only a few thousand feet into the atmosphere, and we're using pressure levels here, but these equate to about the first 4,000 or 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. So the cold air is typically relatively shallow, as an example that comes down out of northern Canada, down across the southern mid-latitudes. And it's usually capped by something we call a temperature inversion. So it's cold here, it's cold here, it's cold here, and all of a sudden we have warmer air above this layer. And that typically is the limit for vertical cloud growth into the atmosphere. That's why we don't get thunderstorm, we don't get lake effect snows that are 45,000 feet tall. So I want to mention the concept of this capping inversion that actually caps the cloud development here. So now I want to go on to my real-world example. First time I had my digital camera out back in 2005, flying from Buffalo to Chicago on a winter day, and I knew we were going to get lake effect snow bands. So as I'm flying across Lake Michigan here, I see all these narrow fingers, these narrow streamers of snow coming off this clear land here where it's really cold across the warm lake and developing snow on the leeward or the downward side of this lake. So here's my real world example. What I'm going to do, I flew in, but what we're going to do is start with pictures I took from here working backward across the lake. And yeah, the flight attendant wasn't too happy I had my camera out as a ground approach, but hey, it's all for science, everyone. So here we are. Here's the Lake Michigan shoreline, okay, and Chicago's back over here, all right? The winds are coming off of the shore out of a westerly direction, and look what we're getting here. Does this look like that pool in Disney World? Does it look like the pond in the Adirondacks? Yeah, this really cold air is coming over this relatively warm body of water, and we're getting all these little steam devils, these little pockets of steam coming off the lake. You can even see, kind of see the waves down there as well. So let's we're going to go back a little further now. Okay, we can see this coming off the shore. Now let's go a little further over the water. Okay, so the air is going to get modified a little more, and as it does, we see these little pockets of, looks like little cumulus clouds developing here. Let's go a little further back. Oh yeah, now we're seeing clouds really popping up in the atmosphere. And now let's go to the east end of the lake. So there's the Michigan shoreline over here. The winds are coming from a westerly direction, and look at this layer of clouds here. Let's pull back one more, and you actually can see cloud streaks or streets here, and that is the lake effect cloud deck that we have here. By the way, they're not growing very high into the sky. Well, there's a temperature inversion there, and if you can see this on your screens, it may be a little difficult to see, but you see this thing right here? That's a power plant up on the shoreline here, and you've got steam coming out of the power plant, but number one, it's going in this direction, so it confirms the prevailing wind, and number two, it's not going very high into the sky because you know what? It's capped by an inversion here. So these are low top, probably about 3,500 foot tall clouds. They're producing a little snow on the downwind shore. So once again, here we have it. It's 2 degrees below zero in Wisconsin. It's 14 degrees in Michigan. And what happens to the air mass as it comes across here? Well, if we take a look at a sounding of the atmosphere again, and this gets a little technical, but hang in here with me. On the Green Bay side, the air temperature is very cold at the surface, and your inversion level is up at about 900 millibars. Oh, I'm going to say maybe about 3,000 feet in the atmosphere. Now let's go take a look at the sounding that we had for that same morning on the Michigan side. And on the Michigan side, you can see that the inversion is somewhat higher here. The air has been modified quite a bit as it crossed the lake. In fact, the inversion height grew by about 1,000 or 100 millibars, so we probably saw about a 1,500 foot rise in the inversion level as we got to the Michigan side. The air temperature in dew point also warmed up, and that helped to create the clouds that produce the lake effect snow. Okay, little break here for a second. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. And I hope everybody's hanging in there with me. I love to talk, so here we go. Okay, so what different types of snow bands do we get on lakes and on oceans, and how do they develop? Well, in an attempt to classify these, I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 different types of snow bands and what factors are responsible for so many types of banding. So, it typically is the shape of the water body, the orientation of the body of water with respect to the prevailing wind direction, and the wind speed and the shear, the change in wind direction within that layer that produces the clouds. Okay, so let's go to our first type of snow band. And our first type of snow band are these that we've seen many times already in the presentation. This is multiple banded snow. Here is Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, and you see all these very narrow little streamers of snow. Well, this is referred to as horizontal roll convection. Now let's put all that together in this little description here. Okay, so here I am on the Michigan side of Lake Michigan. North is up there, south is down there, and Chicago's located right here. All right, the winds are coming off of the landmass here, and let's go up to this little inset here. As the winds come off the landmass, we get these little bubbles of clouds of rising air that develop over the lake. You've got a little bit of lift in the atmosphere here coming off the lake that produces that cloud. The prevailing wind takes this little channel and pushes it downstream. You end up with these little counter-rotating vortices, swirls here, where they come together, they are forced together, they converge, and the air comes up to produce the cloud. And then on the other side, where they come down, and both of them coming down together, the air descends, it warms and dries, and that's your cloud-free area. So what you end up with is all these little counter-rotating vortices producing these cloud streets across the body of water, and that is horizontal roll convection. For the geeks here, the wavelength, updraft to updraft, is about 3 times the distance as the height of the boundary layer. That's up to the capping inversion here. So I'll leave that to you guys to figure out. I'm not getting into the technical aspects here of the theory. We're having a little more fun with this just to give you the conceptual ideas. So, okay, so where do they form? Multiple bands? They don't necessarily have to form on a lake. You just got to move cold air across a warm body of water. Well, here's an infinitely large lake. This is the northeastern United States. There's Cape Cod right there, Long Island sitting there, and we've got air that's coming off this relatively cold landmass here in the middle of winter across this body of water we call the Atlantic Ocean. The Gulf Stream sitting out here. It's pretty warm. And take a look at all these streamers of snow coming off of this landmass. And by the way, where you have a little bay here, this concave bay, that produces a little more convergence of the wind right here. And that's a favorite area for the biggest snow bands. And so we can follow these as they go downstream here. It's a pretty neat image. So what's the prevailing wind direction there? I think I've got this in here. There we go. It's coming out of a north-northwest direction, and the snow bands line up parallel to that wind. Okay, how about this area here? Again, we visited a few times. This is Lake Superior. You can see these little bays creating the more significant snow bands, but again, one after another, just like you saw when I flew across Lake Michigan. Prevailing wind direction here out of the northwest, horizontal roll convection. This on the left is a satellite image of those types of snow bands that occur with westerly winds coming across Lake Michigan. And on the right-hand side of the image, you actually see the precipitation. So we're using a weather radar here at the same time, and we're running a loop of these snow bands. And it's pretty neat. Man, if you've ever driven through this, it's crazy. You go from sunny skies and you get into heavy snow flurries, heavy snow flurries, heavy snow, one after another as you drive this stretch. These don't produce exceptional snowfalls typically like what we'll talk about later are single bands of snow, but they can be a nuisance, and I'll tell you what, they can be a real danger. Many times each season, I see this quarter here, and I think it's I-95, or I-94, I believe, down here in southwestern Michigan, Benton Harbor in these areas get these snow bands that come off the lake here. And I've seen many multiple car pileups here as people go from clear skies into these heavy snow bands doing 65, 70 miles an hour, and we get something I refer to as vehicular convergence, and that is terrible traffic accidents that occur from this. So they could be very dangerous. Hey, they occur in different parts of the world. I talked about this. Here's the Sea of Japan, and this is a snow event back a number of years ago. And so what we have here is, here's the low pressure system. The cold front's gone through. We've got cold air coming off this strip of land, or this area of land up here. Anybody want to know what that is? Well, of course, it's Siberia, it's Russia. Some of the coldest air in the hemisphere comes down across the Sea of Japan on northwesterly flow, and it hits the highlands, the elevated areas of the west coast of Japan, from Hokkaido and Honshu here, and what you end up with are bands of ocean effect snow, and you can see these streamers in here. So there's Sapporo. Honshu is located, I think I've got these right, right here, and here is the main island of Japan right here. And indeed, if we take a look at a satellite loop of this activity, and this is a one-day loop, visible satellite imagery, and you can see here's the northern island of Japan, right here is Siberia, Russia, and I should say Russia, the continent here of Eurasia. It's clear skies here. There's no clouds over this. That cold air is coming down, and it gets modified over the Sea of Japan, and it develops these streamers of snow that hit the west shores here and produce tremendous snows. This is a radar showing some of the snow bands here that are coming off the Sea of Japan, and there's Sapporo right there, known for the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. There's a good reason why they had the Winter Olympics there. They have a tremendous elevation there, which helps promote additional lift and snowfall here, and they've got
Tom, looks like we've lost your broadcast again.
Hang tight, folks. We're trying to get Tom back online here.
hello there, everybody. Going back to the discussion here, does everybody have me?
We got you, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, and I apologize for that. Gee, just when I get going here, right? Okay, so we're going to go back here, and we are going from our current slide. Henry, we have the Sea of Japan and multiple bands on here right now. Is that correct?
That's right. It looks good.
Okay. All right, everyone. Maybe it gave you each a chance to get a little sip of water or whatever you might need to do. So let's continue to go forward here in other parts of the world where we see multiple snow bands. The Gulf of St. Lawrence, for many of our Canadian listeners, you know this area very well. And here's a boxed in an area here in the Gulf of St. Lawrence where we're going to zoom in on this image, and you can see these parallel streamers of snow coming off the cold, clear land here and producing snow as we go downstream into the Canadian Maritimes. And by the way, I wanted to show this other area up here. This is off the Labrador, it's the Labrador Sea up here, and this is in February of 2013. We got a big ice shelf that's developed off the shore here, and if we zoom in on this, we've actually got southwest flow producing these multiple streamers coming off the ice shelf itself. So again, cold air off a warm body of water. Hey, for those up in the Northeast, Cape Cod, you can get snow as well off of the ocean if the wind direction is right and you blow cold air over the ocean. This is an amazing little case here. This is a very, very shallow area of cold air, and I'm going to start by zooming in on the temperature and the wind direction here up at about 4,000 feet in the atmosphere. On this day, we had winds coming off the land at about 15 miles an hour. Well, they're coming off the land, so if they're going to produce snow bands, they're going to be down here somewhere. How is that going to affect Cape Cod? Well, this is up at about 4,000 feet, minus 5 degrees Celsius. I'm going to interchange those once in a while. Meteorologists like to use Celsius. Let's go down to about 2,500 feet in the atmosphere. Well, it should be warmer as you go closer to the ground. Well, it's not in this case. It's some 10 degrees Celsius colder, and the winds are coming out of a northeasterly direction. So here we have at 2,000 feet, the temperature is about 15 below Celsius, and at 4,000 feet above that, it's about 10 degrees warmer. All right, so your inversion, your temperature inversion is very low in the atmosphere. And again, we've got northeasterly winds here. Let's put it all together. At the surface and Cape Cod here, we've got snow going on all over in this area with temperatures into Fahrenheit here, somewhere in the teens all the way up to close to 30 degrees. So let's take a look at the radar and see what's happening here. You see all these narrow fingers of right here on the radar? These are snow bands that are occurring in northeasterly flow in the first couple thousand feet of the atmosphere moving across Cape Cod right here. Well, by the way, at the same time, all of this activity, this is snow from a weather system that's overriding this lake effect snow. It actually feeds these snow bands. Snow falls into them, and it promotes additional snowfall, snow development within the bands. And Henry, I think you were telling me you actually got caught in this band, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, I was living in Boston at the time, went down to Plymouth, went into the Independence Mall there, came out, and boy, that band, I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, they're really interesting. And by the way, take a look at the sounding for this day. Okay, so we're going up in the atmosphere here, and the red line is the temperature. At about 3,600 feet in the atmosphere, the temperature dropped to as low as 3 degrees Fahrenheit, 3,600 feet. Just 700 feet or so higher, at 4,200 feet, the temperature went from 3 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. This is like putting a lid on a boiling pot of water. It capped the snow development. It only occurred in about a 3,500-foot depth. There's your northeast winds down below. And a good friend of mine, Jeff Waltstreicher from the National Weather Service Scientific Services Division, did a paper on this, a foot of snow from a 3,000-foot cloud. And that is ocean effect snow. So pretty neat stuff here. So, okay, we're going to go on to our next type of snow band. These are the ones I love the most. These are the single-banded snows, what I call our mega snow bands. And here's examples of snow bands occurring off the Great Lakes here. This is Lake Huron. You see these two relatively parallel shorelines here, and the snow band works its way downstream. And on Lake Ontario, winds blowing down the long fetch of this narrow lake, okay, with these two parallel shorelines here, that's very important, produce this major single band of snow. So what's the difference between these and multiple bands? And this, again, is my very crude artistic skills, but let's take a very wide body of water, like Lake Superior, or going out over the ocean. The prevailing wind comes from the cold land over the warm lake, and it develops all of these streaks or streamers of snow, okay, and that's what I've drawn in here. Now, from each shoreline of the body of water, you get very weak winds that develop here that go from the cold land to the warm lake, but they don't go very far into the lake when you have a real wide stretch that you're going across. But what if you have a real narrow body of water? Then this effect here, moving cold air over a warmer body of water, gets concentrated in a very narrow area. And so instead of getting all these multiple streamers, you start out with these little streamers of snow, but as this land breeze from each side of the lake, and there's, by the way, also frictional differences that come into play here that I'm not going to talk about here in this talk. As they come together over the lake, they converge and they produce this one strong band of convergence where you get lift in the atmosphere as those winds come together, and that produces this narrow band of lake effect snow. And so this is kind of the concept. You're looking down from the west to the east end of Lake Ontario here, down that long fetch of that lake, and you've got these cool land breezes that come from each side here, and they come out over the center of the lake, and they develop this cloud. And so this is another example, the prevailing wind here going in this direction, and you get these little pockets of clouds that develop here. They eventually consolidate into one major band here, air converging on each side of the lake, and that produces very deep lift in the atmosphere in a wintertime sense and the heavy lake effect snows. So I hope I'm not going too fast for everyone, but let me go back to this for a second. Once again, two parallel shorelines here going down the long fetch of the lake. There is your snow band developing, and this is actually the radar put over that snow band for this event here that produced the heavy snow in this area off of Lake Ontario. And in fact, don't worry about the numbers here. I'll pull these up in a second. Let's take a look here on either side of the lake for that event. On the north side of the lake, winds were out of the northwest at 20 to 25 knots, 20 to 26 knots, so coming out of a northwest direction, while just 30 miles south on the south side of the lake, the winds were coming out of the southwest at 30 knots. Well, can you imagine the convergence that's going on over the lake here where those come together? It produces tremendous lift in the atmosphere, and that is what is responsible for consolidating that band into one narrow, strong lake effect snow band. And as a result of that, from that band, it picked up 3 feet of snow here in a very short period of time, and all you had to do was go about 10, 12 miles south of there. There was no snow at all. Can you imagine the gradient in snowfall there? This is back in 2008, and this is one of my favorite loops here. So this is a radar image of 12 hours worth of radar on Lake Ontario. Put the one end of the hose into the lake, direct the nozzle this way, and you just paste this area with snowfall rates of 3 to 4 inches an hour. And again, this is over a 12-hour period. The snow band is changing as a result of little waves in the atmosphere that move through and change the wind direction a little bit in time. So, and again, you can get an idea for the scale of this. The band itself, probably only about 15 to 20 miles wide, and you could be in clear skies on one side of this band. You go into the band into 3 to 4 inch snowfall rates an hour with thunder snow going on, and then just as soon as you think the world is over, you come out of it on the other end into clear skies again. So that is a great example of single-banded snows. And I'm just going to geek out for a second here. We ran a computer model a few years ago on these types of snow bands here, and I'm going to cut to the chase here. What we did is this is a snow band here, and so I'm standing at this end of the lake, and I'm going to look down at the back end of this snow band, and I'm going to look through a cross-section here going up into the atmosphere. So I want to kind of see the three-dimensional aspect of this snow band, okay? So hang with me here. So here's Lake Ontario. We do this cross-section from the north side to the south side of this lake. So up here is Canada, right here. This is the land here. There's Canada. This is the lake, going across the lake, and I'm going south now, and this is New York State. And this is height in the atmosphere. This image that we're looking at here is the vertical motion in the atmosphere and the vertical circulation that occurs out over the lake with one of these snow bands. And it just shows you how narrow this band is and the tremendous uplift that you get in the center of this band out over the lake. This is going up to about 12,000 feet in the atmosphere. This was a corker of a snow band. This baby produced a lot of snow and a lot of thunder snow as well, which is always fun to be in. Okay, so again, the difference between multiple rolls and single-banded events here, you can see the multiple bands here, much less intense. They're not real strong. They cover a pretty wide area, though, when you're driving, so it can be real rough for driving. This baby here is coming down at 3, 4, 5 inches an hour, thunder snow in this band, and it occurs down the long fetch of relatively elliptically shaped lakes. Okay, and hey, when you got a camera and you're experimenting with it, you take time lapse. This is a time lapse looking at one of these snow bands from the north side to the south side. I did this a few years ago, and what I like about this is you can see these individual kind of convective elements moving off the lake, which is over here, onto the land. And this was at the end of this snow event. These clouds were only about 3,500 feet tall here, but it's pretty neat to see. So, okay, and again, another image of one of those single-banded snows. We're on the north side of this snow band now, and I can't get enough of this, so had to show it again. And that's the result of one of these single-banded snows. So we like to have fun with our photographs. So I think this is a weather observer here. His boots are sticking out of the snow. So a little bit of humor, very little. So, hey, these occur in other parts of the world as well. So let's go into the Gulf of Bothnia, and we are up here in Scandinavia. There it is right there. And if you can direct winds out of the northern latitudes down along this narrow body of water with relatively parallel shorelines, you can set up a single band of snow. And so what I've done here is this is a surface wind coming down the Bay of Bothnia. This is the winds a few thousand feet in the atmosphere. They're nice. They're well aligned here. And as a result of that, you bring that right down this trajectory here. There's Stockholm right there. This spit of land here helps to provide just a little bit of additional frictional convergence here as these winds come around here to help produce this snow band. So I'm going to show you the radar from this. And if you watch this little baby develop here, right there, in time. And it goes right through Stockholm. I don't know anybody in Stockholm, and I haven't corresponded with any meteorologists there, but my guess is this happens multiple times a year in this part of the world due to the Bay of Bothnia. Okay, so how about back in the States here, Chesapeake Bay? Well, if you can direct winds down the length of Chesapeake Bay, and they're nice and cold, and in this case they were, Chesapeake Bay sort of has two parallel shorelines. It's a narrow body of water, and if you do that, you end up with this. This is a radar loop of Bay effect snow that was occurring back in the end of November of 1999, and this had produced a little bit of snow down along the shore here from this this event here. And you'll see this many times, not many, you'll see this a few times in the year when you get good northerly flow that comes down the bay here. So that is Bay effect snow off the Chesapeake. Okay, there's another type of band that occurs when you have very weak prevailing winds or no wind at all. So you put this big high pressure system over a place like the Great Lakes, and so without a prevailing wind, these little local breezes take over, moving from the cold land over the warm lake, and they develop these little zones of convergence over the lake. And the shoreline configuration has a lot to do with the type of band that develops. Okay, so here we go. That's the conceptual model. And let me go to, let's see here, our first example. So this is Lake Erie in the eastern Great Lakes, and on this day, the air temperature were exceptionally cold. I'll convert this to Fahrenheit. I think we're about 4 below zero here. The water temperature is about 39 degrees, so quite a difference in land and lake temperatures. And you develop these little land breezes that converge out of the center of the lake, and you develop this little band of snow. Now, don't confuse this with those big mega bands that I talk about, because these conditions are all driven by these local winds in a very, very cold and calm environment. And what do we typically see? Cold and calm environments are typically high pressure. So the air mass, the cold air, is very, very shallow in these events here, and your clouds don't grow more than a couple thousand feet tall. But they can produce some snow as well. Concentrate on the left side of this picture here for the thermal convergence I talked about, where you come offshore onto a warm body of water. If the body of water is somewhat bowl-shaped, then the winds all seem to converge right toward the center here, and due to Coriolis forces and other forces, you can actually develop a little circulation here that we refer to as a mesolow. And if you take a look here in this satellite image on Lake Huron, well, this part of Lake Huron is relatively bowl or circular shaped here. And this was under a very strong Arctic high pressure system. And land breezes coming off of this land converged over the center of the lake here and developed a little spin in this to develop a mesolow. They don't produce a lot of snow typically, but they can put down a few inches and cause some travel problems. So I think I'm going to go to the next image here, which is one of my favorites. This was taken long, long time ago when I had hair. So this is back in the early 1980s, and this was one day where we had really, really cold temperatures. It was probably about 10, 12 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and the lake was in the upper 30s. So you had about a 40-degree temperature difference here. You had these little local winds that were coming off the land onto the water in the bowl-shaped or circular-shaped portion of Lake Michigan, and you actually developed this beautiful mesolow on the lake here. It didn't do a lot when it came on shore here around Holland, Michigan, put down about 3 to 5 inches of snow, but this is what we call thermal convergence, just due to temperature differences on the lake, can do to produce a different type of snow band. And here's a great example of one of my compadres, a couple of guys in the National Weather Service did a great study on this. You can see the big spin in the radar image here in the atmosphere. So let's go and take a quick look here. This is the actual mesolow as it came onshore. We're looking at the satellite imagery here in South Bend, Indiana, and I'm going to show the radar in a second here. But we could do a whole course on lake effect snow right in this one satellite picture because you got multiple bands developing off the wide stretch of this lake, horizontal roll convection. You got a single band of snow pretty much developing down the fetch of this lake with northerly winds, or multiple bands over here. And because it was a real big prevailing flow here, it actually developed this little circulation that got a little kick off the shoreline here where the shoreline sticks out here, and it came down and actually ended up coming in here. So let's take a look at the radar and show you what happens here. So there it is right there. You got it? Boom, and it comes on shore. Let's do that one more time. Picks up a little circulation there. There's that spiral, and it comes on shore here. Doesn't look like much, does it? If you're looking at radar, I'll digress for a second and say multiple bands here on the radar. Check them out. And westerly winds are producing a major band of snow here at the same time on Lake Ontario. A lot going on here, but let's get back to this and look at this spiral. Okay, so when it hits here, doesn't last long, probably reduces the visibilities and produces a little bit of snow, but here's the result. And that was a major, major multiple vehicle pileup that occurred down near South Bend, Indiana on February 20th of 2008 due to this rather innocuous looking lake effect snow event. So we're going to kind of tie this all together now. I think I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. We're going to go back and take a look at what it looks like when we go, once again, from clear skies. Here we are on the north side of this snow band, and decide to really be brave, I'm not sure how smart, but brave, and drive in to one of these major bands of snow. And there you have it. We're punching the core of a lake effect snow band. Probably not quite as dangerous as punching the core of a tornado, but again, it could be some real issues trying to travel in something like this. So I'm not going to play all 7 minutes of this. We'll just, you can go to YouTube to really geek out on all of this. But I do want to show this next one, and I love this one because there is so much that you see here meteorologically from this. It's almost like a boiling cauldron of water. Watch this carefully, and you can actually kind of see the updrafts. The lake is out here. We're coming down the full length of the lake. We're on the north side of this snow band in the city of Buffalo, and I want you to just watch this. So here we go. We'll play this a few times. Check this out.
And Tom, if you can send us the links, we'll put the links to these YouTube videos up on our website.
Oh, absolutely. We can do that because these are fun to watch. And I'm going to stop this for a second and see if I can get back on here because I want to geek this out again, bring it back to, let's see here. Will it do this for me? Right about there. Stop. Not sure if we get to it or not, but if you go to the links and you watch this carefully, right in here I actually see a spin up here at one point that actually looks like a little snow spout. It's kind of like a steam devil that goes in here. So let's pull this back again and let it play. And right there. Yeah, it just happens real quickly, but look at that, man. That is intense. So, so there it is again. There's a great image of a snow band right there. This was that same snow band as one of these, James Fry, I guess it was flying into the Buffalo area. This is surreal. Look at this baby. It is lit up by the lights of the city here. And again, if you're in the city, you're fine. Tell you what, I lived in the middle of this snow band, and my daughter actually, and I have a picture of this, will show you an image of how much snow came out of that band. So there you go. That's what lake effect snow can do. This is for all my snow lovers. This is the lake effect snow capital of the world, I consider, the Montague Inn on top of the Tug Hill east of Lake Ontario, and appropriately named the Lake Effect Inn. And of course, I'll go back to that. It's like anybody else. You get Delta Bowl lemons, you try to make lemonade out of them. So snow lover's paradise. Okay, here you are trying to shovel out the entrance. This was a patio door, I believe, that got covered with snow from this major band in Buffalo. Again, just fun stuff. This poor guy, he's going to have a tough day. And I referred to my daughter. She actually had to crawl out the window, kitchen window of the house here, and dig down off the deck to get the dog out so he could do his business. And look at the look on his face. He's not a happy camper, by the way. So, and we're going to end it here. Nothing like a cozy evening next to the fire. So I think this is all I've got here. And yeah, so that's the end. So it went pretty quickly, guys. I hope everybody picked up a little bit out of this and enjoyed this amazing facet of Mother Nature that occurs in the wintertime. By the way, I do want to mention to you, I only have enough time to do so much here, so I would like to spend a little more time on places like the Great Salt Lake in Utah, where they get lake effect snow. We even have reservoirs in the Dakotas, very small bodies of water that produce this same type of phenomenon. So I'm open here for questions if anybody has them.
Thanks, Tom. What a fantastic presentation. Wow, this is good stuff. Tom also has a website which we have up on the page. He takes pictures of snowflakes, and it's called Buffalo Flakes. Is that correct?
Yes, it's buffaloflakes.com, and
we'll have that posted. Yeah, it almost sounds like a cereal.
Yes, well, you know that as the winter weather expert here at the Weather Channel, my favorite breakfast, of course, has to be Frosted Flakes. Okay.
There you go. And you can watch Tom on the Weather Channel. What time of day are you on, Tom? Are you on most days, or?
Yeah, we rotate different times of the day, but when the winter weather is interesting, I'll be on at different times. I think tomorrow and next week I'll be on typically in the evening from 6 to 8 p.m. and I'd love to be able to educate you and entertain you with winter weather.
Well, you do a great job. You really do. Hey, here's a quick question I've got for you, and then we'll go to our viewers. If you guys have questions, and we're getting a bunch of them typed in, so we'll try to get as many as we can before the end of the half hour here. But I was wondering, you talk about thunder snow. Is the lightning in the thunder snow mainly in cloud, or is it cloud-to-ground strikes that you get in that?
You know, I haven't done a lot of research on it. It's purely empirical from what I've gone through. My gut feeling is most of the lightning is in cloud. It's actually lightning that's going from convective turret to convective turret. So what's interesting about the lightning is oftentimes you'll get this, and by the way, in snow it's amazing. It's like a flashbulb going off when the lightning occurs and it's snowing. And then oftentimes you'll hear the rumbling, the thunder go on for, it seems forever. And I think it's just these lightning discharges that are going right along the length of that snow band between convective cloud elements. But we have had lightning strikes, cloud to ground, within these snow bands as well.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. I've got one here from Dawn, and she wants to know, what about large rivers or straits such as the Mississippi River? I think too, maybe the Hudson River. Can you get river effect snow if the fetch is right with the winds?
I have seen cloud bands develop off of some of the major rivers. So yes, theoretically you should be able to have that occur. It's a little difficult down to that scale, but theoretically it does occur. Now, whether we get any snow out of that is another question. There's actually a great paper, if you Google it, about cloud bands developing, I believe it's off a water treatment plant, pond near Chicago, and they actually got some snow crystals that came out of the sky on an exceptionally cold day when air moved across this large water treatment lake. So there you go.
Okay, here's one from Rob and another one from Clifford, almost similar questions, and we'll try to take these together. What is the ideal temperature differential between the air and the water for lake effect snow to form? And the other question is, what is the optimal lake temperature that provides the greatest potential for heavy snow?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, gentlemen, those are both very good questions. So the optimal temperature difference, you know, typically you want to just develop a lapse rate, a temperature drop in the atmosphere up to the cloud level that ensures that parcels are going to rise and produce the snow. And so typically we look at about a 13-degree Celsius difference between the lake and about 4,000 feet in the atmosphere is a nice magic number to produce snowfall. I look at about a 10-degree temperature difference between the lake and the surface air to produce that snow. The other part of the question, what's the optimal lake temperature? Early in the season, when the lakes are relatively warm, and the air mass is cold, but not as cold as the midwinter, that's when you get the most moisture into the overriding air mass. And so a lot of times our most powerful lake effect storms occur early in the season in the November to December time frame. I hope that answered it. Okay? Are we there?
Henry, you might be muted.
Well, I'm sorry, I pushed the mute button there. We've got a question here from two folks, actually Ron and Deborah, both separately, wanted to know, can lake effect snow be forecast reasonably well? Can you predict the events like a 40% chance of lake effect snow today?
I think we've done exceptionally well in predicting the general answer as to, yes, will it occur and approximately where it will occur. But because they occur on such a small scale and there's so much going on such a small scale, it is a great challenge for forecasters and computer models alike to predict exactly where they're going to occur. You saw that picture of the city of Buffalo. How do you know it's going to be on one end of the town versus the other? And the snowfall rates that occur within these storms, that's also a very difficult challenge for forecasters to predict. That being said, the lakes are static features. They don't change. So when you move cold air across them, there's a lot better chance that computer models are going to do relatively well at predicting how the snow bands develop on these lakes. So I think we have some excellent forecast skills in being able to do this, and our small-scale computer models each year do better and better at predicting how and when these are going to occur.
And Christopher wants to know, is there a favorite model you use when forecasting lake effect snow?
That's a very good question as well. I like to look at computer models that, first of all, have higher resolution. That means that they look on a much smaller scale across the Great Lakes, and so they're able to more accurately simulate the shape of the lake and the way that the atmosphere is going to interact with these smaller bodies of water. So I typically like to look at, for our computer geeks, the HRRR model, which is a mesoscale model that operates out of our National Computing Center in Washington. Here at the Weather Channel, we use a model called the RPM model to look at this. One thing I will caution you, one of my good friends, the science officer in State College, Pennsylvania, at one time said, these mesoscale models are absolutely amazing. They can produce some very highly detailed, inaccurate forecasts, so be careful even using those models.
Richard writes in and he wants to know, what determines the inland extent of the snow band?
That's a great question. And by the way, these snow bands off the Great Lakes can actually propagate for hundreds of miles downstream. As a young forecaster in the National Weather Service in Buffalo, one of my first awareness of this was one day seeing a snow band that was coming off of Lake Ontario that started upstream on Lake Huron. And this band of snow cut southeast down the Mohawk Valley, and it was snowing in Islip, New York, so on Long Island from the Great Lakes. We very often under northwest flow will see snow bands that have come off of Lake Michigan that then work their way downstream across the western slopes of the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia and into Maryland, and you get lake effect snow on that western side of the Appalachians from these snow bands. So if the wind direction is very well aligned through the snow band and you come down a long fetch at the lake, these channels of convergence can extend hundreds of miles downstream.
Okay, here's David. David in Pennsylvania wants to know, is it a wet or dry snow? So inches per inch in liquid. So is it a usually a wet snow that you get with these, or?
Yeah, so another excellent question. The snow to water ratio, the wetness of the snow, has a lot to do with the temperature structure of the atmosphere above you. And typically the warmer it is, the wetter the snow is. So lake effect snow is interesting because you're coming off a relatively warm lake, but you're going into very cold air above that. And what I have found is early in the season, these events can be just like early season large-scale snow events. I've seen snow-to-water ratios of very wet snow of 7, 8 to 1. But during the middle of the winter, when you have this open lake and you've got air, like, air temperatures of 10 to 12 below zero around you, and you think it's too dry to snow, no, you're still pumping a lot of heat and moisture into the overriding air mass. In those cases, you'll get lake effect snows that have a snow to water ratio of as much as 40 to 50 to 1. Those are just amazing. And boy, there's nothing like getting a few inches of that and going out the next day to do a little bit of cross-country skiing. That's my favorite time of the winter.
Here's one from Matt, who's our CoCoRaHS coordinator in New Jersey, and he's a Buffalo native, and he was wondering, what is your most memorable lake effect event that you've ever experienced? For him, it was the December 2001 storm.
There are so many. Probably the one that sticks most in my mind is one that unfortunately produced a tremendous amount of damage. October of 2006. The lake was 62 degrees. We had cold air coming across the lake, marginally cold. Who in the heck is going to think about snow when the lake is 62 degrees? Well, by the end of that night and the next morning, 24 inches of snow fell on trees that had yet to lose their leaves. Over the city of Buffalo, power was out for more than a week. There are some reports that said as much as 90% of the trees across the metro area sustained damage from that. It was one of the most devastating storms I had ever been in, and that is probably the most memorable for me.
Thanks. Here's one from Dennis, and Dennis wants to know, is there any correlation of wind speed to start and end lake effect events?
Yeah, there is a sweet spot for wind speed for lake effect snows to develop, and I know one of my research colleagues, Dave Kristovich, and I believe Neil Laird may have worked on this as well, ran some modeling to show that on lakes, I believe it was the lakes like Lake Michigan, where we get multiple banded snows that set up, they looked for a sweet spot, and I think it was somewhere, a surface wind somewhere around 10 to 15 miles an hour to develop the nice structure in these bands of the parallel roll convection. But we have had major lake effect snows occur on the eastern Great Lakes with winds in excess of 35 to 40 miles an hour. So as long as you can channel that air down the long fetch of that lake and develop convergence over the lake, you're going to develop a snowband.
Tom, we're getting a lot of questions. Are you able to stay on a little longer?
Oh yeah, this is fun. I got a lot of geek friends out there, I guess, listening.
Yeah, no, this is great stuff, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. Again, if we can't, we will email. Tom will talk to you through an email. Here's one from Chuck in Indiana. Wants to know, has freezing rain band ever occurred with lake effect?
Has freezing rain ever occurred with lake effect? That would be That would be difficult. I guess theoretically it's not out of the question, but no. I have to think this one through. I have never been in an event where freezing rain has occurred. You would need to have warm air coming across a cold surface, and so it's completely the opposite with lake effect. It's the cold air that generates the snow, and the large-scale setup to produce freezing rain would not be conducive to snow itself. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I've not seen it. I don't think it's theoretically impossible, but I would say no.
All right, Tom wants to know how much lead time is involved on average to warn the public about these events?
Whew, man, I'll tell you what, that is the biggest challenge for a forecaster. In some cases, the more subtle events, we'll have an idea maybe 6 to 12 hours in advance, and you may pull the trigger on issuing a warning on one of these events just a few hours before it begins. However, when you get setups where you're going to, on a large scale, put a westerly wind down the length of Lake Ontario as an example, or a southwest wind down the length of Lake Erie, you may have an idea as much as a week in advance that there's going to be a major storm. And I go right back to last fall in November, this 70-inch snowstorm that hit Buffalo, New York. 5 days before the event occurred, the forecasters were already talking about the potential in their forecast discussion, and 3 days before the event hit, they were able to narrow down the area that was going to get the snow down to a particular county. So it varies depending on the weather situation. In some cases, you can have significant lead time. In others, there's no lead time at all.
Richard writes, he's an avid skier, and he wants to know if there's a one-stop shop product from the National Weather Service to get good forecasts about lake effect snows. Do you know anything? He's in the UP of Michigan.
Yeah, the UP. Well, you've got the Marquette National Weather Service office there, and there's no better group than the guys and gals up there that predict the snows for the UP. I would suggest that going to the National Weather Service website and clicking on the UP of Michigan, you will get to that local forecast office. You may know that already, but I want to let the rest of the listeners know as well. You'll get to that forecast office, and each region of the National Weather Service has a different way to get to their products, but if you're a real geek, you want to go to something called the forecast discussion. And the forecast discussion is a very technical discussion about all the parameters that are involved in producing lake effect snow. It is, again, for weather geeks, there's no better place to go than those discussions. So that will help you in your area. As far as the Great Lakes overall for a one-stop shop, I would not be aware of any one place that you would go to get that information. Like I say, I think the National Weather Service offices are set up to deal with the local aspects of weather, and that's probably the best place to go.
Okay, great. Let's see. We got a couple more here coming in. Gail, who's in Texas, wants to know. She says the lake effect snow images sometimes look like a white haboob that you see out in the desert. Any similarities going on there?
Yeah. That's, I never thought about that, but it certainly does. It looks like a white haboob, that one that we see of Buffalo. But in a haboob, I mean, it's a dust storm. What's happening in those images is you have strong winds that are moving along the ground and kicking the dust and dirt up, and that's what you're seeing from the air. Now, in a lake effect snow event, it's not snow that is being kicked up off the ground. Rather, it is snow that is falling and producing that veil of white. So that's a great question. They look the same, but they're different.
Okay, are you still with us? I think we may have lost Tom. Tom?
Yeah,
give him
looks
another
like
second.
we temporarily lost him again. We'll see if he can come back on.
Yeah, and if we don't get him back on, we will send him your questions. And, well, looks like he's trying to get back on here again. So bear
Yep.
with us with these. Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay.
Okay.
Here's one from Marquette in Michigan. Speaking of Marquette, can you discuss the effect of elevation on the amount of snow deposited? So does that, what effect does that have?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I don't think I spent enough time on that, but elevation certainly enhances the lift of the air parcels as they come off of the lake and will help to produce additional snowfall. And I don't have an actual magic number for that, but I would suggest that probably somewhere in the range of maybe 10 inches per 100 feet of snowfall for annual snowfall a season from those, from just the effect of elevation itself.
Henry, you might be muted again.
Whoops, sorry, pushed the wrong button. Here we go. Jeff is a pilot, and he wants to know what is the climb rate of these lake effect cumulus? Not as high as summer convective, is it?
No, the vertical motions within these snow bands are not quite as high as what you would see in the summertime thunderstorms, but they are strong enough to produce a fair amount of turbulence within the band itself. And I don't have anything at my fingertips, unfortunately, Jeff, but there's some pretty substantial lift within.
Well, I think we may have lost Tom again. We'll try to get him back one more time, and then we'll kind of wrap this up for today. We'll take another question or two, and again, we'll follow up. If we haven't answered your question, Tom will follow up back with an email from you. So, well.
Do we have me?
Now you're back again. Okay, we're going to just take a question, one or two more questions, and Tom, if you wouldn't mind, we'll send you the others. If you could follow up in an email, that would be great. Can you hear me? I think we've lost him. Okay, well, we're going to say thank you to Tom for a wonderful presentation today. This presentation will be archived on our website, on the webpage. We will
There we go. Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure why this is happening today.
As I was just saying, we're going to have your presentation archived on our webpage, on the WxTalk series page that you've got up there. And we'll also have Tom's slides as a PDF where you can go through them slide by slide. Okay, one last question for today, and again, Tom will follow up with you the best he can through email. But Rob from Amherst, New York, and this is a good question, how does the lake effect seasons of snow vary during El Nino years? We hear a lot about El Nino this year. Does that have an effect on these?
Well, it's certainly going to have an effect, because to have lake effect snow, you need to get cold air across those lakes. In a strong El Nino pattern, the Great Lakes are typically warmer. That region is typically warmer than normal, so there would likely be less outbreaks of cold air. And that would mean that there would be less lake effect snow. But hey, even in the strongest El Nino seasons, all it takes is one good outbreak of cold air over those warm bodies of water, and you can get hammered with feet of snow. So don't put the snow shovel away.
Okay, Tom. Well, thank you once again for taking time out of your busy day to be with us. This was a great webinar. I learned a lot myself. I'm sure other folks have. Oh, there's the Buffalo Flakes. You see it there
Yes.
on the website, and we'll have this also on our website on the WxTalk webinar page. If you go to Tom's talk, you'll see that, and we'll put some other links in there. So thanks, Tom, and for the rest of you out there, please mark your calendars for our next WxTalk webinar, and that'll be 1 week after Thanksgiving. That's Thursday, December 3rd, and this is a special webinar we have every year. It's a review of significant weather events during 2015. Greg Carbon from NOAA's Storm Prediction Center puts this on. I've seen him in the past. They're really great. He goes through the top 10 events, and so you don't want to miss this. And this will be back at our normal time, which will be 1 p.m. Eastern. So we've got that on the page there. And then Paul Soselski on the 10th will be giving one on radiosondes. There it is right up on your screen there, both of those. So please join us for that. So finally, when signing off today, please take the short survey that'll pop up on your screen, and we really thank you for being with us.